All right, so I'm doing the check. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
And you don't see anything weird in it. It's just the presentation, right?
Yep.
All right. I appreciate that. um, Welcome all. Happy Friday. It's Fundraising Friday yet again. Thank you all for joining us in this conversation for hybrid events. And as always, usually doesn't go together. As always, we try to have something topical as our entry photo. And I felt like hybrid events. One recent news with Lizzo having the temerity and gall of touching a flute that she was invited to play, and doing it with so much joy. I felt like was exactly the type of message that I wanted to send, and also just a moment of like hell yeah, for at least in my in my life. I sort of loved all of that and even some of the outrage. So thanks, Lizzo, for giving us something, at least me, something to smile about and to make history a living thing again, and music um, discussions a living thing again. So this is the Progressive Multiplier team. We like to joke that we are small but mighty. You'll occasionally see my colleagues join me in these conversations, either presenting or just pitching in, or sometimes being a fly on the wall because they also want to participate in the community and learn themselves. But if you ever have any need to reach out, ask questions, feel free. These are the folks that you will talk to. Of course, everyone who has been to a Fundraising Friday workshop before has probably seen Bethany Mackey, our executive director, present in the past. In the reins she has handed the reins over to me to do these trainings as the senior director of movement group engagement. I want to hear your feedback. The Resilience Initiative provides um, surveys for you all to fill out so that we can, of course, formally get information and make changes and adjustments so that we can do a better job. But I'm also a fan of the informal. If you ever want to reach out, you have ideas for workshops, suggestions for me to how to do better, things that annoy the living heck out of you, that I do, let me know. I'll do my best to try to curb those those bad behaviors. I love my colleagues. They're rock stars in my eyes, and I'm proud to work shoulder to shoulder with them on the work that we do every day. So who are we? We are a funding intermediary, which means we raise money to give it away to progressive groups to try to create the change that we're trying to create every day. Our specific focus in the way that we give grants is that we fund fundraising experiments, and there aren't a lot of us out there who do that. We want to prove to the philanthropic sector that investing in fundraising and spending money in this area is the best way for them to invest in nonprofits' financial stability and security, and that it has a multiplying effect right there in our name. That's sort of like the shorthand poly version of our story. Of course, we have the more formal thing up on the slide, but I'm sure you've seen it a million times. But we basically, the gist of it is that we really are about building the progressive movement and helping them thrive in their efforts to organize people and organize money to create change. So who do we make grants to? All kinds of groups that are doing that are typically in the civic engagement, public education sort of space. We don't currently do direct service grants, and the areas that we do give funding for is achieving justice, realizing democracy, and restoring the environment. Because we have to raise it to give it away, we don't always have funds to give out. But if you have a fundraising experiment that you want to talk about, that you want to see if we're able to fund you, hit me up, go to our website, check it out. You can fill out our general LOI, And when funding comes in and lines up, you may be able to become a grantee and see what it's like to work with us on that side too. So the Fundraising Fridays is brought to you by our partners at Resilience Initiative and Leaders Trust. It would be a big help if you would please introduce yourself in the chat, put your name, your title, where you're at, say hi to each other. We want to let this be as much of an interactive community as possible. But also, as a side note, it helps me keep an attendance list so that I can report back to the Resilience Initiative about how many folks attended at each session. And sometimes we can't tell that by your email address, what your name is and where you're from and all of those things. So please say hi, use the chat as a way to communicate. Also, it's a big help for me if folks interact as much as possible, like interrupt, raise your hand, put things in the chat. But I'd love it when I can see faces. It lets me know if I'm doing okay. I understand if you don't want to do camera on, I get it. Sometimes it can be hard for me to keep up with things in the chat and do the presentation. So if you put a question in there that's relevant in the moment and I'm not catching it, just speak up, please. I've tried to put enough space in our presentation so that we can have conversations, and I want you all to take advantage of that. So what's available through this partnership? In addition to Fundraising Fridays, we also have coaching opportunities, which means basically all you do is you reach out to Michelle Mangle, whose email probably brought you here to the session in the first place. And she'll let you know how many, if you are able to, if you're able to sign up, she'll do an introduction. And you can get a one-time coaching session. If you want a block of 5 hours, you can get a block of 5 hours. And that would be to work with me on a particular project or to puzzle through a particular situation. We have folks who join Fundraising Fridays. I see a couple of folks today who participate in this option. And if anybody wants to speak up on it, how terrible I am as a thought partner, I mean, how great I am as a thought partner, you should feel free to say something if you wanna, but no need if you don't feel like it. We have just a few more sessions between now and year end. We have the part 2 of this session, which I'm hoping to bring together folks who've done hybrid events recently and make sure that we're seeding the crowd with folks who've done them so we can have a real fruitful discussion about what it was like to do a hybrid event. But also anything that in this session that you feel like I didn't touch on that we want to touch on in more depth, I'll add it into our session next time. But typically we do a little bit more, talky me at you on this one, and then hopefully more of a conversation on the next one. But like I said, I put in lots of space so that we can have conversation in this session as well. After we do the second hybrid session, we're going to be doing 2 sessions on reporting. I would love to get your input and thoughts on what kinds of reports that you would like to see us talk about, and what are the reporting points of friction that you have, like what is information that you want to try to get across that you're having difficulty getting across. It would be a really helpful to me if you can guide me in what your needs are around reporting. This session was put on there at specific request from attendees of as all of these were, but I could go in a million different directions on this. Emily?
Yeah, I had a question. So there's someone on our team, our small development team here, that handles most of the reporting, and like that's more her role. Would it be an opportunity for both of us to sit on the call, or her instead of I just think that she'd be able to bring more to the table and get more out of it in her role.
Oh, absolutely. If you are part of the Resilience Initiative, if you got in, for example, through the Resilience Initiative,
Yep,
anyone in
yep.
your organization can attend these sessions.
Oh,
So
okay.
you can even share the link and have them join right now if you want to. But yeah, and if So have them register through Michelle and they'll start getting the emails directly, but absolutely they can join and they should.
Okay. Thank you.
And especially if they have any specific questions or reports that they really think are good that have been useful in their sharing out, I'd love to hear that, especially in advance, so in my planning.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and then of course at the end of the year we're going to do some planning for next year, and then hopefully we'll have some good understanding of what the trends that we saw this year. What did we see this year that will help us in our planning for next year? So that's going to be a two-part on lessons learned from this year, but also how do we use those lessons learned to plan ahead? So getting up in there, what and why of hybrid events. We're going to talk about logistics, venues, and tech, and then promotion and engagement. There is a lot that we could talk about. If you Googled hybrid fundraising events, the number of blog posts, articles, stories, workshops, and tools that people are selling to help you to run them are plentiful. So what I tried to do was to get the best of the information that I could lay my fingers on in my research, but also try to bring it to you in a format that touches what I know that folks are working on. It's not going to, of course, be an everything conversation, but hopefully it gives you enough of an overview. And then, of course, the good news is that because there's a part two, if there's something that I just blatantly missed out on or something that you want to go deeper on, let me know and we can make sure to incorporate that in our next part of the process, part of the session. So are you planning a hybrid event? Why or why not? I want to hear from you.
I can kick us off. We are planning an event. It's not, for most of the staff, it's not on their radar that we should maybe think about making this hybrid. But I am thinking that exactly for the accessibility issues that were laid out in the description of this session. So that's where we are.
Great.
Very, very same boat. Here we have our annual award celebration. We haven't done it really since COVID. So accessibility issues, but also our awardees have families from all over. And that was one of the coolest things we did when we just did it virtual, was being able to connect people who otherwise would have no clue or just wouldn't be able to see their people.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, kind of figuring out what it could look like.
Great. Great.
This is Michelle at Gender Justice. We're in the very early stages of planning first ever big event that will be some combination. Our vision right now is maybe like a breakfast with a keynote, and then we're a legal organization, so potentially a couple of CLE or continuing legal education sessions, so almost like a mini half-day conference or something. So again, very early stages. It'll be sometime in 2023, probably in the fall. So I just thought it would be worth coming to this and thinking about whether to make it hybrid.
Great. And I see, Rafaela, you said maybe depending on this workshop. So either you'll be inspired or terrified. We'll see how it goes from here. But one of the things that I guess I've come to the conclusion of just in my research and also in my thinking is as a person who's been in development for more than 30 years, what would I be doing right now if I had, if I wasn't in this space, and if I was running a development shop, I would probably start considering every event that I did and to have a hybrid, to have some virtual functioning, because I do think on some level folks have changed and they want options, and now they're not. If we talked about this 5 years ago, people would be like, oh, it'd be clunky and difficult and weird to, to do the Brady Bunch screen and, with all these different heads talking. And I think that now, because we've had 3 years of weirdness, and virtual life, we're all sort of used to it. And it is not at all as scary, um, to think about to the technology that you would need. It might be scary to be like in charge of it and to implement but I don't know anyone who hasn't touched a virtual thing. Even my parents who are in their 80s had attended 2 virtual weddings during COVID. So, I had to, of course, tell them, like, Dad, turn the mic off. We can totally hear your conversation with Mom. Like, uh, but that just sort of goes to show you there's probably very few constituent groups that haven't touched the tools that we would be using in a virtual event space. Hybrid just means we have to figure out, how do we marry these two things together? So the what and the whys of hybrid events. So what do we mean? Because, it's always smart to define terms. Hybrid events combine the in-person event and the live stream or for virtual attendees so that both groups can participate in the relationship building aspects of the event, the educational aspects of the event, the rah excitement and celebratory aspects, and the fundraising. What's really cool about hybrid, what makes them special, not just because, it's a both and situation, and they're special because you have all these extra technology concerns, but they're special because they let you reach a broader, deeper audience. It lets you be, it forces you to be creative in how you do engagement. It forces you to be creative in how you communicate, and to be thoughtful about how you do these things. It can help you lower the barrier to entry for more people. That doesn't mean I'm a fan of going to no cost events, because I'm sort of not, but I'm not opposed to that. I think you have to make those decisions organizationally, but you can create a lot more tiers in your ticketing depending on on what you're offering to which group, and what you offer to which group might be based on your capacity to deliver, a super fancy virtual experience versus what you can offer at a live event. So if the virtual attendee doesn't get the same experience, then you could offer a different price point for that. It also allows you opportunity to do the peer-to-peer fundraising. If for those of you who were part of the last fundraising Friday, 2 Fridays, we talked about peer-to-peer fundraising, and almost all of the conversation was wrapped around how to utilize it around events. So because events already have peer-to-peer built into them, typically in the form of host committees and stuff like that, think about how doing a hybrid event lets you to do peer-to-peer too, but it lets you to do peer-to-peer on a whole nother level because you have the virtual component and the live component. So just like any event, you have to consider what you want to accomplish by having your event go hybrid. Are you trying to reach people in different ways? Are there different people that you want to target? So if you had a high-end gala in the past that had a really high barrier to entry, like a $500 ticket, do you now have the opportunity to think differently about that event and to offer tickets at a different price point that allows you to have a whole lot more people come to your event? Do you want to use it as an entry point for new donors? Is it a way to introduce your organization to new people and introduce new people to your vision, mission, and values? Are you trying to is your event about celebrating your organizational impact, the achievements that you've had, milestones? Or is it really all about the money? Is it about the fundraising and getting in big cash sponsorships and stuff like that? And the answer that I usually come up with is usually it's all of the above. So is it all of these things? Is it that your events always are going to have a desire to bring in a whole bunch of different donors, a whole bunch of new people? It's a point of entry, it's a celebration, and it's a money raiser. Now, event fundraising, if you've been around for more than a minute, you know that event fundraising is the most expensive way to raise a dollar. But event fundraising usually, because you have more than just financial goals, you have to weigh the ROI differently. Like, if it's about creating community, that has an opportunity cost. So you're not going to make the biggest profit on your special event fundraising, because you want to do all these other things too. So just remember that like sometimes people have magical thinking around events that like if you build it, they will come, and you're going to raise millions of dollars because, you know, so-and-so organization's giant gala raised, you know, bajillions of dollars. Rarely are those myths ever true, but and you also have to like sometimes bring people down to reality. You're like, no, there's costs, there's going to be lots of things that we have to do, and you know, prepare folks for the reality of the event. But think about all of the things that you want to accomplish, and before you even go down that path. So when it comes to hybrid events, there are really lots of different things that people can do. You can do galas, luncheons, and dinners, wine tastings, and coffee and dessert. I've heard some really cool things that people have done where they literally sent like everybody who signed up got 2 bottles of wine, and during the event, everyone cracked open the wine and they had a discussion about the 2 wines. They had like a coffee and dessert. I've heard about like coffee and dessert happy hour where they literally sent people like a Peet's Coffee gift card and a box of scones or a box of cookies. And so it didn't matter if you were at the event and you were having coffee and dessert and mingling with people, or if you were on virtually, you also had your coffee and your cookie, and you felt like you got the same thing that everybody else got. Those are, like, to me, sort of like a fun way to create engagement across the rooms, but I don't think you can always do that. Book clubs and talks are great opportunities to do hybrid. You don't necessarily have to have people in a room to discuss a book. You don't have to have people in a room to listen to do a talk. There are folks who talk at our peer-to-peer fundraising event, workshop about a cooking class that they did, and that they were looking at other interactive fun things to do that were about community building, but also had opportunity for them to do mission discussions and stuff like that. Auctions are built for these things. I've heard about concerts and DJ'd parties. I've attended some DJ'd parties from the comfort of my sofa. There's scavenger hunts and games. And I think that there are even pieces of these things that you can do at your event. You can combine some of these together. Like you can do games and scavenger hunts and auctions at a gala that is also hybrid. So even though most of this presentation is going to sort of be in the frame of like a typical event, like party with the program, I couldn't possibly try to cover all of the aspects. But I want to talk about some of those things, especially if you're thinking about like a conference, if you're thinking about something quirky or different that I didn't even think of, and you want to, sort of riff on what the nuances are. Let's talk about them. So one of the things that you need to consider about when you're about whether you're going to go down this road is what, not one of the things, many of the things that there are many things that you need to consider when you're getting ready to go down this road. So do you have, like was stated, you've got an event that you normally do, you want to bring back. how does it lend itself to a hybrid situation? What are the things, if you were to bring the event back, how would you bring it back in a way that you could have folks attend live and attend virtually? Do you have donors who are like, oh God, I miss getting together? Are they sort of stating that they want to do things together at the same time as you have donors who are like, yeah, I'm not ready? And not just donors, of course, I'm referring to friends and, stakeholders and all of those things too. Do you have something to celebrate? People, one of the things that I've heard from nonprofits is like they've had 3 years where they didn't have the opportunity. Their event was their big celebratory thing, or they always had multiple things going on throughout the year, and they just feel like it's just all been like digital messaging out, message back, message out, and it just has lost that like interactive flavor, and that feeling of celebration around the cause and the work. Are you missing that? Importantly, do you have the technical tools and skills to pull it off, or are you willing to invest in them and get the training that you need to implement them? Do you have the time, energy, team, and budget? And then do you have the systems in place to effectively engage folks after the event? And this is one that you need to ask yourself for any kind of event, a virtual, live, or hybrid. The biggest mistake I see people make is like after an event, they're just like, whew, that was fun. And they don't really engage with people again until it's time to plan the event again next year. The event should always be an entry point and an engagement tool, but part of a system of engagement, education, follow-up, solicitation, all of that. Get moving people from passive to active. So what are some of the in-person considerations? And I'd love to hear some of you guys' thoughts on this too. But there are going to be things that you need to consider before you even go here. Like, are there still COVID related rules for your region or for venues? There are venues that have more restricted rules than might be mandated by your state or region. Do your staff have safety concerns? And really talk about it. I think it's important to have this conversation with staff, especially the staff who are going to be required to be in attendance at the live portion, and finding out where people's comfort zones are, how much they're willing to interact with folks, what level of safety do they need. And then also, like, you can then determine, all right, someone whose safety concerns are really high, maybe we can use them to manage the virtual aspects so they don't have to do the live stuff at all. But also, taking into account what those safety concerns are and making sure that you have a space that's equitable, not only for your attendees, but for your colleagues. I think it's really important to think about the age and health concerns of your target audience. Back in the day when I was working in a queer organization, we had lots of folks who were HIV positive and had other health concerns. I need to take that into effect when I'm doing both the live portion and the virtual. I don't want my virtual attendees to feel like they are not as loved and respected as the people who showed up. And the people who showed up, what do I need to do to make sure that I'm creating an environment that is as safe as humanly possible, without feeling like I've gone off the deep end and been ridiculous and made too much of a barrier. But all of that is about your risk tolerance, your comfort, and your community's needs and your cultural values. So think about things like, will there be any masking related rules? I went to an event recently that said there was a tented space on the outside, and they're like, if you're in the tented space outside, you don't need to mask. When you're inside, mask. That was the written rule, but folks sort of followed it. They also required vaccinations, and they also required a negative COVID test that you had to show with the date stamp that you did it within, a certain number of hours before the event. So if you have things like vaccination checks and negative test checks, how will you check? Are you just saying that you're going to have these things, or are you actually going to check these things? What do you do when people show up and they haven't done these things? Are you going to turn them away? Are you going to have rapid tests there or make them sit in a corner and wait for 15 minutes to take their test? So think about these types of things beforehand. Tell me what you all are thinking. What are the in-person? I've got a little bit more on in-person considerations, but tell me what you're thinking about some of the things that worry you, or how do you make it feel? How would you make it feel accessible to folks who might be immunocompromised or have or not be able to be vaccinated because of their health status or something like that? What are your thoughts? I feel like I see thinking faces.
This is the big question we're struggling with, because my partner is immunocompromised. So I have a very, very high level of safety, required safety, a very low level of risk tolerance around COVID. And we're talking about doing a casino night. And we're not talking about it until next summer. So potentially the COVID picture could look different, but also potentially it might not. And so I think, yeah, I don't know. From my chair, it feels like there's not a way I can participate in any in-person casino night. Because I mean, if masks were required, yeah, maybe. But then people don't wear masks correctly a lot of the time, and people wear cloth masks, which aren't really that effective. So, you have to go to this like policing masking, and who wants to do that, especially who wants to do that at a fundraising event. So I feel like having some sort of virtual element really is the only way to have this event be accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we struggled with that same thing this week. We just had a small fundraiser that was going to be outside. And then for a couple of reasons, we had to move it inside at the last minute. And it's the first, indoor in-person event we've hosted since COVID. And I got approval from our ED, and she was like, tell people to wear masks, but don't enforce it. And so that's what we did. We put in the email, wear a mask, and we had masks at the table. And, I don't know, maybe 20% of people wore masks, but I struggle with that. Do you ask, but just not enforce it? Do you just not ask? Do you enforce it? Which, yeah, doesn't feel great for all the reasons that you just said.
Yeah, I mean, I too struggle with this. I think that in my planning brain is I would probably go very far in the safety category, and then know that policing human behavior is incredibly difficult. So I'd probably have lots of signs around. I would have a very stern and direct conversation with my colleagues to be like, we will model the behavior we want from other people. So we will we will all wear masks. Please don't break the rules. We will do this, we will do that. So I would sort of demonstrate good behavior. Bethany is very open about the fact that her husband is HIV positive, and she has attended events, and they have rules in their household of how she only does them masked. When she came into town into DC, where I live and where some of our colleagues live, we went out to dinner together. We went out to dinner together outside, and I know that that when she went to a conference, they tested every day. I went to a conference where they asked folks to test, but they didn't require it. And the very next, after the first day of the conference, there was an alert that went out that said that there were people who tested positive at the conference yesterday. So I immediately switched to virtual. because I wasn't willing to be, because I was feeling actually uncomfortable. The space was really crowded. People weren't wearing their masks like they should. And I was like, and this was in May, so it was even closer to when COVID was feeling more spicy. You know, it was just like when we were in a breakout session and the room was just super crowded. When we walked in, everybody was like, sit every other seat. And then next minute, there were so many people in the room. They were like, there's a spot, there's a spot, there's a spot. And the whole every other seat thing didn't work. So when they said somebody tested positive, I was like, I'm out. I'm not going to go back. I can't. So, you know, I think that you have to do what you can do and what you feel and what you can try to enforce in a way that's not, doesn't put anybody in a really difficult situation, because we've all heard stories about the difficulty in policing people's behaviors around it. So I would just make sure that, like, whatever decisions that you made, your team is on board, that you post all over the place, like, please wear masks in this space, please wear masks in this space, please respect people's distancing. You know, like if somebody asks you to step back from when you're talking, give folks space. Like, you can do things that that show your values and the cues that give people permission to be like, hey, can you step back? I can hear you. You know, like, I'd like to so that gives, like, it makes it easier to have those conversations. But yeah, it's a difficult decision to make, but hybrid events give you the opportunity to create space for folks who just don't feel safe. And then, like, let's just be honest, it also creates space for folks who don't give a shit, but they just don't want to go. Like, I don't want to get off my sofa. I don't want to travel. I can't afford to travel. I can't, you know, like, I can't afford a babysitter. I don't want to do, you know, like, there are all those things that come into play. So it's not, you know, yes, it's the health concerns because we are in this place that we are, but also think about all the other accessibility issues. Like, I worked in a disability related organization for many years. I have several friends who are wheelchair users. And even when an event is accessible, a venue is accessible, they're not always greatly, awesomely accessible. So it would give folks with disabilities maybe opportunities to participate in an event that might be more difficult. If they could only attend live, and things like fatigue that sets in when you're at a cocktail party where there's a lot of standing, for example. So I think it's important to have all these questions. Also, like, some other considerations are, like, think about who, before you even get there, like, who would come, who would be the folks who would attend, who would attend in person versus virtually, and also importantly, who probably wouldn't do either. And why I put that one, because it would be like, why would you even, like, if they're not going to attend your event, they're just not going to attend your event. It doesn't matter if it's hybrid, virtual, or otherwise. I think it's important to go through this process when you're, especially if you're not, if you don't do events, if you haven't done events, if you don't do them frequently, if you don't, because especially the first time you do one, you're not going to, you might not have great success. Thinking in advance of, like, who are the people that we want to get in the room, literally creating a list, and then saying in the room, and I mean that virtually and physically, and say, like, I actually don't think these people would ever come at all, whether we do it online, whether we do it live. I think these folks would probably show up at the live part. I think these folks will probably show up at the virtual part. Planning that out in advance gives you, thinking about that at least, gives you a sense of, like, venue size, technology needs, and everything associated. When you're talking about venue size, you're also then talking about food and drink and all of the other things that come with that. So it is important to think about who will come to the live, who will come to the virtual, who won't come at all, now now you've sort of targeted your audience. Of course, you're going to invite everyone, well, just about everyone. But it'll help you with your plan. Does that make sense to folks? The other thing, before you even venture down this way, you can't do these things alone. Event fundraising is hard, and hybrid event fundraising or hybrid event management is harder because there are just a lot more pieces to consider. I have done, the teeniest, tiniest of events, and I have done 1,000-person galas with celebrities and big production team things. And the teeny, tiniest of events and the biggest galas have some of the same planning pieces. They're just different scale. So you've got to understand things like audio visual on some basic level. You've got to understand tech on some basic level. So a planning team helps you fill in knowledge gaps, but it also helps you just get help. Make sure that so I'm a big fan of planning committees. Make sure your committee is diverse. It's not just staff, and it's not just a development team. I mean, if you're lucky enough to have a team, that it includes volunteers, friends, boards, the staff, programmatic staff. You want to make sure you have a diversity of opinion and thought in the room when you're doing some of the planning. Now, they don't have to be at every planning meeting. You could have like, a big sort of brainstorming, big picture, long meeting where you try to nail a lot of sort of things down, and then you have a smaller implementation team that helps with everything else. But getting a broad opinion, I think, is important in the planning of the event, because you're going to really diversity of opinion is just invaluable. So what a team can help you do is to help figure out what is stuff that really only works in person, and what are the things that are going to work virtually, and the stuff that and what stuff are you not sure of that you need to really puzzle through. And what aspects of either the event itself or some of the engagement things, like all of the different aspects of your event, are going to be available to both audiences. So for example, like that coffee and dessert fundraiser that I heard about, where they had at the live event, they had coffee and dessert, of course, for everyone. But they also sent a box of cookies and a gift card to the virtual folks. So the virtual folks felt like they could participate. Is that something that you could do? The wine tasting one was another really good example. Like you could do something like if you're going to do a virtual gala, but the only part of the gala that you're going to do is the program usually runs during dessert. The people who attended the gala got the rubber chicken and all of that. Is there a way to sweeten the pot for the folks who come virtually and send them a box of cookies so they can at least participate in the dessert portion of the program? Like, you can think about those types of things. Maybe it's not food that you send. Maybe it's a party favor. Maybe it's a tchotchke. I know in gala fundraising, we always had gift bags, and you're always trying to get swag for everybody, and every chair had a gift bag. And as annoying and painful as those were, it was always one of the things that people really look forward to. If that's the type of event that you were used to having, could you create a swag box that gets mailed to your virtual attendees? It's another way to get folks' addresses, if that's if that's part of the need. But it makes them feel like they didn't miss out on some of the benefits of coming live. Again, doing things hybrid means more work. So if you want to do stuff like that, you have to put that in the plan and plan that through. But what's really important is to make sure that whenever you're putting together a planning team, that there is clear guidance, whether it's like, this is just for a brainstorming session and then you all are free to go, or this is a planning team that has a sort of like a job description, and these are the things that we're going to do. And by signing up for the team, you're committing to do things. Then make sure that those are clear expectations laid out for the folks who are going to help you, because it sucks, especially when you have a lot of work to get done and not a lot of people to do it, and you think you have people who are going to help you and they aren't. So make sure that those expectations are laid out clearly and as well in advance as possible. I just want to say one thing about conferences in particular. Conferences are probably the place where I see hybrid the most right now, but they also are the place that has the most technical aspects to consider. Now, there are lots of tools out there that you can use, services, planners, things that you can hire. You're going to have to build in. I don't think there's an event planner in this country right now that doesn't have a whole system in place to do hybrid. But know that but when you do a conference, know that there are multiple things that you have to consider for each aspect. So conference is really a set of events all wrapped up into one time frame location. So it's not that you have to think of the technology needs for your plenary session, like how are you going to stream the keynote speaker? Will there be a Q&A, and how will you capture the questions from your virtual audience? But you have to think about that for your breakout sessions, for the educational sessions, for the roundtables, if you're going to do them. Are you just going to like have a skinnier program for your virtual attendees because you can't add tech for each one of those things? Is there going to be a social event? Are you going to include the virtual people for the social event? How do you include the virtual people for the social event? So there's just a whole lot more. So even though conferences is like the most common, I feel that I see space that is going virtual, there are a lot of the same questions to have, but broken down into each aspect of the conference. So it's like planning for a social talk, planning for a talk 10 times if you have 10 sessions, plus the plenary, plus the social. The other aspect of a conference is the whole, like, how do you, conferences are networking possibilities. So how do you make sure that you have the capability for people to network? And thankfully, a lot of the event planning module platforms out there do this for you. But you need to consider, if you're going to go down this road of like possibly doing a conference or bringing back a conference that you used to have, think about that when you're looking at the various platforms, and think about all of the things that you want the attendees to experience, and how do you build that in? And then you have to make decisions like, this is just getting too giant, too hard, and too expensive. So then you can start making decisions about how to pare things down if you need to. All right, so that's the whole, like the run through. Now let's talk about some of the logistic stuff. So things that you'll need to consider, just like everything else: the theme and type, the date and location, the tech, marketing, tickets, program. So when we're all of, and so much more, planning for an event can either be like really short or take a full year. I mean, I put 6 weeks to 6 months, but really I've had, depending on the size and scale and scope, conferences, huge galas, you start planning that one, you have 1 day of recovery after the gala and you start planning the next one 2 days later. So planning can really take a long time. You have to add time when you're doing something hybrid. You have to, because everything now takes you a little bit slower because you have to constantly consider your virtual versus your live audience. There's going to be, technical considerations that you need to take in to make sure that you're, and that you plan well enough in advance. Your marketing plan has to be much more robust. And you have to really think about things like tickets and how do you do your program in a way that is entertaining for both the people in the audience and and virtually. And I giggle because sometimes our programs are not entertaining for the people in the live audience, and we should really be working on this. So this is sort of, I'm going to run through these really quickly because this is sort of about how planning and budgeting, the things to consider. So location and tech considerations, like really, like if you have an event planner, they're going to, usually the parts that they care the most about are the location and tech, which is why they're here. But I would even pull that out and be like, as a separate, depending on the event. But you have to think about all the costs and the timing of things. Like, at what point do you have to give the full, here's the deposit. At what point do you not get your deposit back if you cancel? When do you have to give the head count? When do you have to do stuff like that? Audiovisual, can they manage, they might have a sound and stage, but is the quality good enough for you to be able to plug into and stream that? Do you know what platform you're going to be using for streaming? And do they have, does the venue have experience with that? If the venue provides their own audiovisual AV crew, are they familiar with it? Does your crew, if you have to hire someone, have that? Is your crew like a friend with a bullhorn, and that's how you're going to do it? Like, you have to think about all the different ways that you're going to broadcast sound, not just to the people in the room, but to the people who aren't in the room. Things like Wi-Fi. Some venues, like as soon as you walk in, it's a dead zone and you have to pay extra for it. You have to make those considerations, and you have to think about what level of Wi-Fi. Do you have a segregated section of your Wi-Fi bandwidth so that you can stream and that doesn't get disrupted? And there's another section of your Wi-Fi where you're giving out the password so that you can have folks live tweet and post on social about the event. All of that is going to incur costs and needs to be thought of in advance. Food and beverages, this is typical event planning stuff. But where, like when you're thinking about the hybrid aspect, is you're going to have different numbers at your event than you might normally have at your live event. So making sure that you have some drop dead deadlines on what your head counts so that you have enough food. If you're going to do something quirky and fun, like send food to people, treats or something, do you have to plan that in advance as well, and building that in? Thinking about all of the things, decoration cost types and money. So marketing and design, you have to have a budget for that too. Do you have to hire a designer? Do you need to create a whole new set of graphics? Are you going to be mailing stuff, printing stuff? What are all the other costs associated? Are you going to be doing ads? What platforms or services do you need to build in to the event? All of this is before you even start developing your plan, really, or the considerations. If you want to, I usually plan with a budget. Like, when I'm doing an event, I can't plan without a budget. Or I can't I build my budget and my plan simultaneously, I guess is what I'm trying to say. When it comes to like the program length, this is also an important component. Like, if you're used to having a really long program because people are sitting in chairs and they've just been fed and their bellies are full and they're sitting with their cocktail, you can drone. But if you're having your program streaming, it makes it a little bit more difficult to do that. You have to think about the timing. You have to think the transitions between the speakers have to be tight. Of course, I will share the slides. I will. So when I'm planning a program, I try to keep very tight tolerances for how long I want speakers to speak. If there's this was even in the before days when everything was live. If I could get anything on video to make sure that my timing was tight, I did that to keep the program tight. If you do that, if you have a mixed media of live people talking and video content, you want to make sure that you can seamlessly transfer, not only for the attendees that are live, but for the attendees that are virtually. they say that fatigue kicks in at around an hour and a half. I think it's probably shorter than that now. And definitely I wouldn't go over a program over 45 minutes. That wasn't a program that wasn't interactive for over 45 minutes. And I would say that however, like, but programs don't even, please don't think that you have to do a 45-minute program. Your program can be like 10 minutes. It can just be the executive director, you know, saying a few words or somebody just saying a few words, and that's it. I would always do a pitch. And if I did a pitch, I would make sure that that ask or the sort of that there was a crescendo to the event, that it built up, and that happened about 3/4 of the way through the program. So that the ask kept folks in the feels right after all of the good testimonial things happen, and that you still had a few minutes of program left, so all those folks are still deliberating, had time to also, like, you know, make their donation too. What's really important to build in run through time, no matter how much it doesn't, like, I don't care if it's a donor briefing, if it's just a talk, no matter how much you think folks are used to using these types of tools, something will go wrong. Folks aren't thinking about what's in the background. They're not planning ahead and keeping like the dog out or the whatever. Like, have these conversations, practice the transitions, practice with your own team, like, you know, bringing someone in and having someone come out from a video perspective. When you're in the venue, you've got to test the, you know, mic checks, have folks, you know, who aren't comfortable speaking, give them some microphone awareness. Especially when I was working in the disability world, we had rules about using mics when anyone in the room was speaking. So if it was a Q&A, you couldn't speak until the mic got to you. But before we even did that, we gave a quick little lesson on how to use a microphone, that it only works if it's right in front of your face, not over here, not down here. So, you know, think about these types of things so that it's, you know, in those situations, it was about accessibility for people in the room. In a hybrid event, that microphone becomes even more important, because that's how the people who were there virtually are going to hear. If you have interactive features, you have to consider how those features are going to work. So if you've got the opportunity for people to ask questions, then you have to test, you have to practice and do a run through of like questions coming in, the person who's dealing, you know, like, how does the person who's in charge of interjecting with the question? We just got a question from someone in, you know, virtually, and then, you know, like, all of that has to be worked through. So I would love to hear what kind of, I mean, I ran through a couple of like, what are the things that you've heard of? Or is there something that you want to explore? Or did we already talk about that and keep going? I'm going to keep going. All right. So promotion and engagement. Create an event page. What's great about the tools that we have now is that they lend themselves to hybrid functions. So even if you do the old school fancy invitation in the mail that hits lots of boxes, mailboxes, you can still have an online registration portal. I would definitely create an event page that felt like a one-stop shop. That's where all the updates are. There's a social integration, so you can even, you know, so there can be like a run through of like the posts from social media, and I've even done things where we've had like people who could in that space like give like a, you know, like, hey, so excited to attend, sort of message boarding aspect. Create custom ticketing levels and forms, and make sure that they work. Make sure that you ask for donations for people who RSVP no. Ask them to support the event anyway, or to make a donation anyway. And you can even set it up you can even set up a sustainer program through your event tool by saying, like, you know, become a sustaining donor today, and in addition to your ticket, and get a discount next year. So not only did you get an attendee this year, you got someone who became a sustainer and who likely will become an event attendee next year. So make it clear and tested. I think it's really important, especially on these forms, that people know what they're signing up for, that they are signing up just to do virtual, just to do it live. Maybe you have a ticket price that includes both. Make sure the receipt function works. Have a couple of friends, family, coworkers test to make sure that it all works, that it works properly, and that it is understandable from the user perspective before you go live. There's nothing, worse than having confused guests show up at a live event when they actually bought the virtual prize ticket, or you have a whole bunch of people who didn't show up and only came virtually when you thought that they were coming to the event, and now you've ordered way too much food and you could have saved money. Also, if you're going to do different tiered pricing, one of the benefits of doing different tiers is like you can back out the cost for the food and beverage. So when somebody buys a ticket to a gala, the portion of the event that is not tax deductible is the benefit that they got out of it. For the virtual people, they're not getting the food and the beverage. So their tax deductibility is going to be different than the tax deductibility for the people who came live. So you have to really think about these things when it comes to the receipting as well as how you set up the forms. So for marketing and communications, you want to make sure you have a marketing plan. You want to make sure that you are sending out communications well in advance and an official. You want different reminders for different groups. You definitely need a social media plan, and how you're going to promote the event. And that you also want to create content that is easily shareable. Remember, fundraising, event fundraising is a peer-to-peer, usually a peer-to-peer process. So what you want to do with your hybrid events is make sure that you have systems in place that facilitate peer-to-peer fundraising for the event too. So maybe you have tools for, I'm going to talk about host committees in a minute, but for your hosts to do, like, I'm a virtual host, I'm a live host, and they can have, and so when they're soliciting their friends, they can tell their friends, like, you can go live, I'm going to be virtual, but please, here's the create tools, create graphics, create systems for them to be able to share both levels of content, both levels of asks, make it easy on them to help you spread the word, as an acquisition sort of thinking, way of thinking. You also have to think about things like, how are you going to promote this on your website, and all of the things essentially. And why that becomes important is because just like any time you do an event, you have to create anticipation. Hybrid, virtual, online, whatever, allows you to build anticipation in really sort of fun ways. So you can continually update people in ways that we could not several years ago. When new, like, I can't tell you how many times I've sent out gala invitations where it was like, keynote speaker TBD. That's fun. If you need to send out the save the date and you don't have some information locked in, it's okay, because you have an event page on your website, or you can do updates by social and by email to let folks know the changes in the program and what big thing happened, something that you're going to be celebrating. Maybe the organization got some major awards since you started planning and when the event's going to happen. So these tools, or just, a good solid marketing plan, allows you the opportunity to keep your folks updated while building the anticipation for the event. Excuse me. you can, you can have fun with some of your marketing stuff. Like I thought it would be would be really fun to be like, you could have two different marketing voices, right? You have the voice that promotes the live, you have the voice that promotes the virtual, like attend our fancy gala in your bunny slippers. Like I, don't necessarily want to get gussied up, but I love me a gala. So maybe, I could do that from the comfort of my home and still, so like you can actually have fun with the way that you promote the event. You can make messaging that targets like, no, this is my target like audience for people who attend virtually. Like this is my target messaging for my audience that wants to attend live. It's okay to talk in two voices to these to two different groups of people. You might put ads out that have two very different messaging. The people who will respond to the virtual aspect will respond to the ads that target the virtual aspect. The people who are going to be moved by wanting to connect with people again are going to be moved by those messages. The other thing about generating anticipation is try to get folks to share stuff on social. It's free promotion. You always want free promotion. So create opportunities, whether it's hashtags or fun graphics or, encouraging your attendees to post on social that they're attending, and especially how they're attending. I'll be there, looking forward to, to dance with you, or, I'm going to be there. I'll be there virtually, looking forward to hearing from the great speakers, like just encourage folks, give them things to help them promote your organization. Also reshare spotlight posts by other people, especially get your honorees, your staff, your board, your speakers to talk about their excitement and build up momentum, which also means that you might need to help them do that. And you need to put that in your plan, that you need time to be like, hey, keynote speaker, here is some sample post language. Would you mind either copying this exactly or using this as a jump off point to post on your social that you'll be attending our gala event or whatever, using this hashtag, using this link, using this information. So more about the host committee. So the host committee for any event is basically how one of the ways in which you drive ticket sales, right? Like it used to be like, I've done table captains or, lots of different types of host committees. Table captains, it's easy because it's a table of 10 and they've got 10 seats to fill and they're going to fill those 10 seats. Maybe if it's, not that type of event and it's just every member of the host committee is going to tell 20 people and try to get 5 people to attend, like you create a committee that will help you promote and pitch the event, which means you also need to give them the tools, tips, and tricks to make that happen. I think it's really important to have in quotation marks, I should have put it in there, job description, so that you can lay out those expectations of what it means to be on a host committee. You want to encourage and support their efforts, just like we talked about in the peer-to-peer fundraising, and make sure that you applaud them very publicly, and signage at the event, virtual signage, on the website, as a kudo by one of the speakers at the event, to give a shout out to the host committee. And if there aren't a lot of people in the host committee, you can even shout them out by name. If it's a huge host committee, I think it makes it difficult to shout them out by name. But what you can do is say thank you to the host committee and the folks who helped us in your peer-to-peer fundraisers, and you list them someplace else, and that person just then points them to the list and thanks them that way. I think another really fun way to do this, and this isn't just to be like, Facebook is awesome, because I'm clearly not in that camp. But Facebook allows you to create groups. And one of the things that you can do is you can create a social community online. by like building a private Facebook group that is similar to like your web page, becomes a one-stop shop, but is a little bit more interactive, allows people to interact. What's nice about that is sort of a built-in feature. If you can't afford, don't want to invest in some of those really fancy hybrid event platforms that are out there, then it allows you to create space where like people can talk while the event is going on. People can share excitement back and forth. They can, you know, like it's a place to share updates and stuff like that. And it also then gives you a place to like continually engage. So the event, the Facebook group doesn't have to be like, you know, Poly's big event 2022. It can just be like Poly's big annual event. And so every year the group can grow. It can be a place where you're constantly, you know, engaging folks. You put them on the engagement schedule just like anything else, and that community will then grow. It might then require you to have some level of moderation or something, or you can just be like hands off about it. You can let it just self moderate on some level, and then if it starts to get unruly or problematic, you can just turn it off because you'll be in charge of it. But it is one of the places that allows you to really share, for people to interact. They can't come to the event, but they had great conversations with people who were there anyway, because they were talking about stuff in the group. And it becomes a feeder pool for your host committee and your peer-to-peer work next time around. So with just a few minutes, 15 minutes left in the session, I'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, comments, and also what you would love to have me include next time around too. So let's talk.
I have a question. And maybe this is for next time, I'm not sure, but when you're mentioning like why we would do a hybrid, or why, you know, starting to evaluate, thinking of the different events, it got me thinking about how we measure success, and recognizing that most of our indicators right now are dollars. And I was wondering if you had indicators, or if there was, you know, some recommendations for what else we could be tracking, so that we could really show the success, and not just, you know, dollar, knowing that our events mean so much more than that.
Yeah, so I think, you know, what is useful about having a well thought out marketing plan with your event is that you can talk about how the event lets you reach a whole bunch of new people through your marketing. So there's that part. But then there's also like, you can, you know, with a hybrid, you can count attendees, both live and virtual. You can count things like social media engagement, how much was promoted, how much was, you know, like, did people share video and clips? So you can and then, you know, like, for example, with like a tweet, you could, if somebody's tweeting the event, you can then go look at some of the tweets and see what the interactions with those tweets are, and be like, look at the multiplier effect of these people attending, and our reach got further because other people were tweeting at the event too. So you can, and especially if you use things like hashtags, then you can track that hashtag and see what the interaction is. You know, just simply like number of attendees, number who were return attendees, number who were brand new attendees. When I talk about dollars, I talk about new dollars versus, you know, returning dollars. So, and when I do separate them out, like this is a long time donor, but the first time event attendee. So I do complexity in my sharing about numbers, even dollar numbers. And I also share about like the ask, text to give, the ask at the event. Like if you're old school and you pass envelopes, whatever, you know, whatever. I count the dollars raised versus tickets sold in different ways. So I like, so when it comes to things like that, I try to break out the data in as much different ways as possible to, that tells a story. People donated to the event that couldn't attend because, one, they like us, and two, they like an event, they want to see it to keep going. So I use all the different vignettes to sort of measure to share, to tell that story. And then I try to, I didn't put this in there, but it is important to try to capture impact, capture the donor sentiment, whether it is an actual survey of some sort, or if it's a anecdotal and you're just capturing, like on the Facebook group or on the web's page, or just the emails that you got, share the sentiments that people are like, oh, that was so great, I miss getting together and I love that you did this. Or you really made it, you really made me feel like I was part of the event, even though I was online. Like, sharing those types of things I think are important. A lot of, I think there are just some folks who are just like, don't get the value of creating community around mission. So I don't know that you'll ever win those folks over. But I would talk about that. Is that helpful? Or are you looking for something different?
No, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Other questions, comments, things you want me to talk about next time?
The examples you gave were really good starting points, good examples of how people have done this and have made it work in the past. I would love to hear more. And if somehow I have the impression you're putting together a panel for next time, I don't know how I had that impression.
I'm hoping.
Okay. So I didn't make that up in my head. Yeah, if that includes folks who, like you, have run virtual events, who can talk specifically about sort of the activities they did, I would love to just hear even more ways that people are sort of approaching this kind of thing.
Cool. Any other questions? Is there something about this that makes you nervous? Like,
The technology cost. I mean, just trying to build that in to make sure that it is the highest quality. So you're not compromising. So you don't have people who are being introduced to an event that's being done on a phone or something in the back. But that, I think, is going to be one of our barriers, is if we really do want to invest in that as a budget item moving forward.
yeah. And I think that, I think that that's a serious consideration. And I would imagine that, like, if it were me and I was trying to figure out, like, am I gonna make my, conference or event more interactive, I might have like what I think budget, then start talking to some experts and be like, well, if you want to do this, and then it'd be like, all right, now I'm stretching this out. Because, like, that I too would want to make sure that it was like high enough quality so that everyone got the best, the best deal, the best experience out of it. It's a tough question. And some of the virtual events or hybrid events that I'm hearing of are really sort of like toe in water events. Like, they're essentially like get-togethers or parties with like a short, like, these are awardees, and each one has like a little, either a video or 1 minute like this is what I am getting, this award type of thing. And then it's like a 15-minute and then it's done. And that's the only virtual part. I've just seen I've heard about lots of different types of things. And I think that on some level, like if you want to bring an event back, you're going to have to just jump in.
Are people paying tickets for virtual if it's like primarily in person, and the virtual is just an additional, like, are people paying for that? Because we got away with it, I think, the first year when it was just virtual because everyone wanted to give to us anyways, and it was COVID, and people weren't spending money the same way, and so they felt that we would lose our revenue, et cetera. Well, now we're 3 years out, so I think there's a different level of urgency and priority for donors.
I think that's a good question to ask our community because I know several that have had events and what they're seeing. My behavior, I've paid to attend a virtual event in the last year. I also have been invited to several receptions that were free that I was surprised that are typically not free. And I know that the reception was hybrid. So I don't know if it's that. I don't know what the decision making was around those. I'm hearing from event planners that I know out in the world that the adage is true that if something is free, people will value it less, and you have a lower attendance, RSVP to an actual attendance ratio. So I'm hearing that sort of old adage still stands up. Take that for what it's worth. I don't know that anybody has data on it, but.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anything else? Well, I really appreciate everyone jumping in and talking about this. I hope that you got something out of this. I will follow up with an email to to everyone with the slide deck so that you all have it. Stay tuned for part 2. If any of you have done an event recently that was hybrid, or are planning to do an event and you want to be part of the discussion next time, I think it would be great if our conversation next time was a mix of people who've done hybrid events and can speak to like what it was like, and also the hopes and fears of the people who are planning, and just seed the room with folks so that we have a good conversation around it. Again, if there's something specific that I missed that you didn't tell me about, that I didn't write down, that you would like me to include, because right now it sort of sounds like we don't need, maybe I'll do just a quick rehash, but we don't need a lot of new content. It's just more about people's thought processes and how they actually went, what were the results. And I'll see if I can drum up some folks to attend who will speak to those topics. But shoot me an email, give me a call, whatever. And if you have things that you definitely want me to cover next time that in hindsight I didn't. Thank you all. Have a fantastic Friday. Have a great weekend, and I'll hopefully see y'all in 2 weeks.
Thank you so much.